Welcome to the beginning. This is the prologue for the novel, so it's just short. Sit back, listen, and step into the silence of the gods. Once, Soltheris was not just a realm. It was the cherished garden of the gods. Under their celestial favor, humanity flourished. The divine beings showered their mortal worshippers with fleeting blessings, mere echoes of their boundless power. With these gifts, hunters' arrows never missed. Healers mended mortal wounds with a touch. Warriors fought with the fury of storms, and architects raised cities that scraped the very heavens. Yet, this was no paradise. Beyond the high walls of civilization, monstrous beasts and ancient horrors prowled. Survival was a brutal, daily struggle. For centuries, the sacred covenant between gods and mortals held firm. Until the day the heavens fell silent. Without warning, the gods vanished. They left behind only fading embers of their divinity. All but one, the Chaos God. He was a reclusive, feared entity who had long shunned mortal affairs, knowing his very presence could unravel the tapestry of order. Now, utterly alone in a godless world, he looked upon Soltheris and saw a dire truth. Without divine protection, humanity would perish. In his isolation, the Chaos God conceived a desperate, brutal design. He would forge an era of forced evolution. Every 10 years, horrors born of his raw, untamed power would rise, driving mankind to the absolute edge of extinction, forcing them to grow stronger in the crucible of survival. But the first cycle was a catastrophe. The demons he unleashed were too ravenous. Entire kingdoms crumbled to dust. Realizing his grave error, he extended the cycle to 20 years, granting humanity a desperate breath of time to recover. And recover they did. Warriors banded together, clans buried ancient grudges, and healers perfected their grim arts. Yet, progress was still agonizingly slow. Then, the Chaos God discovered a flicker of hope. The fading essence of the lost gods still lingered in the soil, in ancient stone, and in the bloodlines of their survivors. Seizing this fragile chance, he wove these sacred fragments directly into mortal souls. Thus were born the divinants, paragons of power and leadership, wielding shards of lost divinity. With the board set, the Chaos God decreed the final, terrifying shape of his trial, the Malice Bloom. A cataclysm that would surge forth every 50 years. Like a great, destructive tide, the forces of chaos would rise, and humanity, led by their divinants, would stand to meet them. For millennia, this cycle held. A brutal rhythm of destruction and rebirth. But now, the world has grown complacent. The Chaos God has not been seen for centuries. The Malice Bloom, once a terror etched into history, stretched from 50 years to 100, and then faded into myth. Cynical scholars dismiss it as a fable. Warriors treat it as a children's tale. And yet, whispers stir. A chilling unease permeates the quiet corners of the world. Our tale begins on the war-torn continent of Elarith, where 5 great factions perpetually battle for dominance. Among them, the warrior faction rules with an iron will, their bloodlines tracing back to the ancient war gods themselves. Here, amid forgotten prophecies and gathering storms, a hero rises. One who will face a terrifying, undeniable truth. The Malice Bloom is returning. And this time, the gods will not answer. That concludes the prologue. Chapter 1 is coming up next. If you want to follow this journey, make sure to stay tuned for the next update. This is Chapter 1, Strength Beyond the Forge. The rhythmic clang of the hammer downstairs was the first sound to greet Marcus as he stirred. It was the familiar heartbeat of his uncle, Garen, a pulse of labor and survival that had woven itself into the quiet mornings of his life since childhood. Though the sound was a constant, each resounding strike still carried the unspoken weight of his uncle's sacrifices. Dawn's faint glow painted the sky in quiet streaks of orange and pink, spilling over the small room he shared with his 8-year-old cousin, Ari. Ari lay nestled deep beneath their shared blanket, clutching her pillow like a shield. Her peacefulness brought a faint smile to his lips, though it did little to ease the persistent ache in his chest. As his gaze fell upon the small wooden mountain carving on his bedside table, a wave of memory washed over him. His parents existed now only as blurs in time, a phantom warmth of his mother's hands, the echo of his father's voice. They were gone, taken by the earth's hungry maw when he was barely 4. The memories were fragmented, more a lingering ache than clear images, but the void they left remained a vast, undiminished space within him. The mountain carving had been his father's, crafted in a time before the ground itself betrayed them. Now, it was a lifeline, one of the precious few tangible connections to a past ripped away. It was a reminder of loss, yes, but also of the relentless force that had forged him. He closed his hand around the wood, its familiar texture a small anchor, pulling him back to the morning's chill. The dream of his parents still clung to him, a heavy weight, but he had learned to carry it. The loss was a wound that refused to truly heal, yet it was undeniably part of him, a source of quiet strength and unyielding resilience. A final glance went to Ari, still soundly asleep. For her sake, if nothing else, he needed to keep going. He rose from the bed, tucking the carving into his pocket like a hidden talisman before heading for the door. "Time to get to work," he murmured, his voice low, yet infused with a quiet, unwavering resolve. The settlement stirred to life as he descended the narrow staircase. Garen was already at the forge, his face streaked with soot, his movements precise and practiced. The intense heat of the fire spilled outward, merging with the cool morning air, and the familiar scent of molten metal and charcoal filled his lungs. "Morning," Garen grumbled, not looking up from his work. "Dream again?" Marcus leaned against the forge's entryway, nodding. "Same one." Garen paused, wiping his brow with the back of his gloved hand. "You're tougher than most, going through what you did. Just remember, you've got a family here. You're not alone." A small, tired smile touched Marcus's lips. "I know, Uncle. Thanks." "Good," Garen said with a decisive nod, a faint glint of mischief in his eyes. "Now stop lazing about and grab that hammer. We've got work to do." Marcus chuckled softly, shaking off the lingering dread of the dream. He stepped into the heart of the forge, ready to lose himself in the primal rhythm of metal and fire, a rhythm that, for now, could drown out the echoes of the past. Later, silence accompanied his simple meal of freshly baked bread and cheese. Across the table, his Aunt Lisa hummed a soft tune as she poured tea, her movements a quiet dance of domesticity. The morning light caught her hair, transforming it into luminous threads of spun gold. Despite Garen's gruff manner, a profound sense of comfort resided here, a fleeting stillness Marcus held onto with desperate gratitude. Garen's voice interrupted the quiet. "You didn't answer me, boy. Still dreaming of swords?" Marcus's jaw tightened as he reached for the warm clay mug Lisa had placed in front of him. "I said I'm useful here." Garen snorted, leaning against the doorway, his silhouette framed by the fiery glow of the forge. "That's not an answer, Marcus. You've been staring at those warriors like they hold the very key to the gods themselves. You think I don't notice?" Marcus glanced at Lisa, who offered a knowing, gentle smile but wisely chose not to interfere. Just then, Ari's small footsteps pattered on the stairs. She stumbled sleepily into the kitchen, a delightful, tangled mess, and plopped into the seat next to him. "Morning, Squirt," Marcus said softly, a genuine warmth in his voice as he ruffled her hair. Ari grinned sleepily. "Morning. Is there honey?" Lisa, her eyes twinkling, placed a small pot on the table. "Of course. What kind of aunt would I be otherwise?" Garen, however, was not yet ready to let the conversation die. "Useful isn't the same as happy, Marcus," he said, his voice steady and low, carrying an aching concern. "You're young. Don't waste that on useful." Marcus swallowed, his fingers tightening around the rough clay mug. "Happiness isn't the point, Uncle. Surviving is." The stark words hung heavy in the air. Garen didn't reply directly, but he paused, framed in the doorway, a hulking silhouette against the heat. "Surviving isn't living," he muttered, his voice barely audible above the sharp hiss of a quenching blade. The sound broke the fragile silence like glass. Marcus stared after him, the words clinging to his chest like a second, crushing weight. Lisa touched his arm gently. "You've got time to figure it out," she said softly. "Don't rush to carry the world on your shoulders." He forced a weary smile. "Thanks, Aunt Lisa," but as his fingers instinctively sought the wooden carving in his pocket, a question arose. Was the weight already too much to bear? Later, the steady crunch of dirt beneath his worn boots mingled with the whispered secrets of the wind. His mind, restless and yearning, raced with vivid images of distant lands and towering cities, places he'd only heard about in stories. He yearned for more than the small, familiar streets of his secluded settlement. As he reached the outskirts of the settlement, he paused, his gaze drifting toward the majestic mountains in the hazy distance. They stood like silent, ancient sentinels, their peaks shrouded in perpetual mist. The potent pull of the unknown was felt as strongly as ever, a deep, resonant yearning that had lived within him for as long as he could remember. But it was a dream fraught with 1,000 questions and silent doubts. Could someone like him, without the privilege of wealth or the awe-inspiring gift of divinity, ever truly leave? The thought of failure gnawed at his resolve, but it wasn't enough to smother the flickering fire burning deep within his chest. He couldn't stay here forever. The forge, the grain store, they were a part of his life, a comforting anchor, but they couldn't possibly be his entire existence. He wanted more, not just for his own sake, but for the sake of the family who had sacrificed so much for him. "I'll do it," he whispered, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. "I'll become a warrior." The words felt momentous, a sacred promise to himself, to the gruff but loving Garen, to the gentle Lisa, and to the innocent, joyful Ari. It was a promise to see the world, to protect the people he cared about, and to bring true honor to the family that had saved him from the desolate loneliness of being utterly alone. He took a deep, fortifying breath, straightened the strap of his satchel, and resumed his walk. The mountains still loomed, but now, somehow, they felt just a little closer, a little more attainable. Marcus spent the day working at Alber's grain store, the mundane rhythm of his work a stark contrast to his churning thoughts. He hoisted heavy sacks of grain, the coarse fabric scratching against his skin. Every movement was a chore, every sack a reminder of the life he was trying to leave behind. He could still hear Garen's voice, low and steady. "Surviving isn't living." He gritted his teeth, the words a burning coal in his mind. He was surviving, but he knew there had to be more. He yearned for the world beyond the forge, a place where he could do more than just get by. Under the vast night sky, Marcus rubbed the smooth, worn wooden mountain carving between his fingers. It was a living piece of the family he'd lost, a silent tether to the dreams that kept him moving forward. Alber's words still echoed in his mind, "The world's big, and if anyone's got the heart to take it on, it's you." They had stirred a persistent longing, a quiet certainty that he couldn't stay forever. He yearned to return his family's generosity in kind, not just through duty but through an achievement that would make their sacrifices worthwhile. "I'll make you proud," he whispered again, his words carrying a quiet, yet fierce determination. The stars above seemed to brighten, and the majestic silhouette of the mountains stood like an unspoken challenge, beckoning him onward. Turning a corner, he entered a quieter alleyway of West Arbor. His steed, a weary old mare, trotted steadily beneath him. His mind wandered to the warmth of home, but his thoughts froze as a scene unfolded ahead. At the entrance of an abandoned building, 3 ominous figures loomed over a lone boy. The boy, tall and wiry, held a collection of tools and a battered backpack. "Allowance," the boy declared, his voice carrying an unshaken confidence. "No way, Jose. I need my allowance for, let's just say, it's important research." Marcus frowned. "Research? Does he even realize he's about to be pummeled?" The thugs laughed. "Funny guy," their leader barked, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see how funny you are after we knock the sense out of you." The boy, Ron, one of them called him, didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head, his gaze darting to the decaying building as though distracted by something far more pressing. A sharp pang of irritation filled Marcus. "What's with this guy?" Marcus quickly dismounted and tied his mare to a nearby post. The heavy bag of grain shifted uncomfortably against his back as he stepped into the tense tableau. "Hey," he called out, his voice steady. 3 against 1? Doesn't seem fair, does it?" The leader turned, his eyes narrowing. "Who's asking?" Marcus shrugged. "Just someone who doesn't think much of bullies." Ron's gaze finally shifted to him, flickering with a brief, almost clinical interest before he inexplicably turned back to the building. Finally, Ron muttered, a peculiar satisfaction in his tone, "Someone with some common sense." The thugs exchanged uneasy glances. "You've got a big mouth, friend," the leader said, stepping menacingly toward Marcus. "You want to play hero?" Marcus adjusted the grain bag, standing firm despite the knot of apprehension tightening in his chest. "Not a hero. Just someone who doesn't like to see people getting pushed around." The leader let out a cold, humorless laugh. "You've got guts. Shame they won't help you." Fists clenched, heart pounding, Marcus didn't back down. "You sure about that?" The next thing Marcus knew, he was on the ground, his ribs aching. The thugs, it turned out, had not been interested in a fair fight. But just as they were about to deliver another blow, Ron moved with an unnatural speed. A blur of motion and a flash of steel from a hidden dagger sent the thugs scattering in a frantic, bruised retreat. The leader, clutching his sliced arm, glared at Ron before running off with his crew. Ron crouched beside him, his strange, perpetual grin still firmly in place as he casually offered a hand. "You okay there, hero?" he asked, his tone light, almost teasing. Marcus groaned, clutching his ribs with a wince. "I was supposed to be saving you," he muttered, accepting Ron's help. "What the hell just happened?" Ron shrugged, brushing off some imperceptible dust. "You stepped in, got punched, and I handled the rest. Teamwork, right?" Marcus shot him a look of disbelief mixed with grudging amusement, a small smile playing on his lips despite the pain. "Teamwork? You didn't even need me." "Sure I did," Ron said, his grin widening. "You were a great distraction." A breathless, pained laugh escaped Marcus. "Glad I could help." Ron's expression softened slightly as he glanced at the spilled grains. "Sorry about your stuff. Didn't mean for you to get dragged into this." Marcus waved him off, wincing as he bent to gather the scattered grains. "It's fine. Not the first time I've been knocked around." "You've got guts," Ron said, studying him with a curious glint in his eye. "Most people would have just walked away." "Yeah, well," Marcus said, straightening up, "I don't like bullies." Ron nodded, his grin returning. "Neither do I. Guess that makes us a good team after all." Marcus shook his head. "You're something else, you know that?" "Thanks," Ron said brightly. "Name's Ron, by the way." "And you are?" "Marcus," he replied, a small smile finally breaking through. "Nice to meet you, I guess." Ron's grin widened. "Likewise. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a haunted house to investigate." Marcus blinked. "Wait, what?" Ron pointed toward the abandoned building, his eyes gleaming. "That place. It's got a history. Ghosts, curses, maybe even treasure. I've got to check it out." Marcus stared at him, incredulous. "You just got jumped, and now you're thinking about ghosts?" "Priorities," Ron said with an airy shrug. "You in?" Hesitation filled Marcus. He knew, instinctively, that he should have said no. He had a long day ahead and a loving family waiting for him. But something about Ron's infectious, almost deranged enthusiasm, and a peculiar, undeniable pull of the unknown in his own chest, made him pause. "Fine," he said finally, a resigned sigh escaping his lips. "But if I get punched again, I'm blaming you." Ron clapped him on the shoulder. "Deal. Let's go." The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the cobblestones like grasping fingers. Marcus rubbed the dried blood from his nose, his body still aching, but his attention was completely fixed on Ron's energetic rambling. The old house loomed before them, its skeletal silhouette framed against the final glow of twilight. Ron adjusted his glasses, clutching a small toolkit and a flashlight. "All right, here's the plan," he declared, his voice bubbling with anticipation. "We wait until it's completely dark, then we head inside and start looking for signs. You know, cold spots, flickering lights, shadowy figures, the usual ghostly stuff." "The usual stuff?" Marcus snorted. "You say that like it happens every day." "It might," Ron replied with an unconcerned shrug. "You've just got to know where to look. And this house? It's like a magnet for the supernatural. 7 people died here, Marcus. Their spirits are probably still trapped, waiting for someone to help them move on." "Or they're just rumors," Marcus said flatly. "It's an old house. Old houses creak. That's not exactly supernatural." "Spoken like a true skeptic," Ron teased. "That's why you'll make a great sidekick. Every ghost hunter needs someone to keep them grounded, after all." A weary sigh escaped Marcus as he tied his mare's reins to a post. The mare snorted nervously. He patted her flank before turning back to Ron, a grudging acceptance in his posture. "If I'm the sidekick, that means you're in charge," Marcus said, his tone dry. "So if something goes wrong, it's entirely on you." Ron clapped his hands together. "That's the spirit. Pun absolutely intended. Now, let's kill some time. Got any good ghost stories for your fearless leader?" Marcus gave him a withering look, but Ron just laughed. As twilight deepened into night, Marcus couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that he was stepping into something far more complicated than a decrepit old house. Troubles seemed to follow Ron, and he had a sinking suspicion this time would be no different. Yet, against his better judgment, he stayed. The undeniable pull of Ron's infectious enthusiasm, and a small flicker of curiosity deep in his own chest, kept him rooted to the spot. The floorboards creaked eerily under their hesitant feet as they stepped inside. Dust, thick and ancient, floated lazily in the air, illuminated by slender beams of moonlight. Cobwebs hung in the corners like ghostly curtains, and the faint smell of mildew and decay lingered. "This is perfect," Ron breathed, his voice brimming with excitement. The atmosphere, the history, its screaming paranormal activity. Marcus glanced around uneasily, crossing his arms. "It's screaming, falling apart. Are you sure this place is safe?" "Relax," Ron replied, already engrossed, running his fingers over the peeling walls and muttering about residual energy. Marcus followed reluctantly, listening as Ron launched into one of his rambling monologues about the occult. "Ghosts aren't all bad," Ron mused. "Some are just misunderstood. They're stuck here because they have unfinished business, like protecting something or warning the living." "Did you know spirits can attach themselves to objects, Marcus?" "Like what? Brooms and chairs?" Marcus asked, a skeptical glint in his eye. "Sure," Ron replied, completely serious. "But usually something more sentimental, something imbued with emotion, like jewelry or an old painting." "Oh, speaking of paintings," he trailed off, his gaze fixed on a warped frame hanging crookedly on the wall. Marcus suppressed a sigh. Despite his ingrained skepticism, he found himself paying closer attention. "What happens if they finish their business?" he asked cautiously, a genuine curiosity now sparked within him. Ron grinned, clearly delighted. "They move on. It's like the afterlife equivalent of graduating. Unless they decide to stick around, of course. Some ghosts actually like being here." Night deepened, and the abandoned house underwent a subtle, eerie transformation. Shadows grew longer, claiming every corner. Marcus shivered, pulling his cloak tighter, while Ron was entirely absorbed, meticulously arranging his tools and lighting a few candles, their tiny flames flickering and casting dancing shadows. "The spirit might need coaxing to appear," he said. "But trust me, if there's a ghost here, we'll certainly see it." Marcus wasn't sure if he wanted to, but Ron's unwavering confidence made him stay. The house was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, a fleeting movement. "Ron," he whispered urgently, grabbing his friend's arm. "Over there. Did you see that?" Ron's eyes lit up with feverish excitement. "Where? What did it look like?" "It looked like a shadow. A deep, shifting shadow." "Over by the window," Marcus replied, his voice barely a whisper. They both turned, staring intently at a dark, shifting shape silhouetted against the far wall. "There it is," Ron whispered triumphantly. "The ghost." The shadow swayed and flickered. Marcus held his breath, every muscle tensed. But as the seconds ticked by, the shadow's movements became less threatening. "Wait," Marcus said, a sudden realization dawning on him as he stepped closer. "Ron, I think it's just the streetlight. It's projecting through the broken window, casting that shape." Ron followed his gaze, his face falling in subtle disappointment. "Ah," he said, pushing up his glasses. "You're right. Just a trick of the light, after all." A wave of relief washed over Marcus. He chuckled softly, a newfound admiration for his eccentric friend mingling with his amusement. "You're something else, Ron. Truly. It's always the same, isn't it?" Ron said, sighing dramatically before his familiar grin returned. "Shadows, misleading reflections, creaky floors. This is just another case for the growing archive of the mundane, I suppose." "Still planning to do this again?" Marcus asked, shaking his head. Ron laughed, a light, carefree sound. "Of course. The real ghosts are out there, Marcus. We just have to find them." He clapped him on the shoulder again, a surprisingly warm gesture. "Come on, let's go home. We can try again tomorrow night." And despite the aching ribs and the long, tiring day ahead, Marcus found himself nodding, a small, genuine smile on his face. The pull of the unknown was still there, but now, it felt a little less daunting. He had a companion. That concludes Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is coming up. If you want to keep following Marcus and Ron's journey, make sure to stay tuned for the next update. This is Chapter 2, The Unshakable Foundation. From that day onward, Marcus and Ron became inseparable. Marcus quickly discovered that Ron's strength wasn't his only surprising trait. He possessed a magnetic charm that normalized even the strangest situations. Whether they were ghost hunting in crumbling ruins or debating the oddities of the spirit realm, Ron always found ways to keep Marcus engaged, pulling him into worlds he wouldn't normally explore. Ron, meanwhile, began to notice the quiet burdens Marcus carried, the endless hours at Alber's shop, his unwavering dedication to Garen's struggling forge, and the silent weight of his parents' loss. Marcus rarely complained, shouldering his responsibilities without question, but Ron saw the toll it took. One evening, after yet another fruitless ghost hunt, Ron turned to Marcus, his usual playful demeanor replaced by an uncharacteristic seriousness. They were sitting on a crumbling stone wall near the edge of the settlement, the air cool and the stars just beginning to prickle the deepening twilight. "Train with me. My father's academy could make you a warrior." Marcus stared, his breath catching. "What? I can't afford that, Ron. It's impossible." "I'll take care of it," Ron replied, waving a dismissive hand as if money were an inconsequential trifle. "Here's the deal. You become my assistant ghost hunter. You help me with investigations, and I'll cover the expenses. I'll even talk to my parents." Marcus hesitated, the offer feeling impossibly generous. "You'd really do that for me?" "Of course," Ron said, though a flicker of earnestness softened his casual tone. "In exchange, you have to accompany me everywhere. You help me hunt bigger ghosts." His usual grin faltered, replaced by something deeper, something genuine. "Deal?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Marcus frowned slightly. "What about your studies? Don't you need to focus on school?" Ron rolled his eyes, a smirk playing on his lips. "Of course we'll study, stupid. The world doesn't revolve around swords or war, you know. How are we going to investigate without knowledge? Science and proof are just as important as anything else." Marcus stared, his heart pounding. For someone who had worked so hard for so little, Ron's offer felt like a miracle, a tangible path toward a dream he had only dared to whisper in the dark. This might be my chance to become a warrior, he thought. Taking a deep breath, Marcus nodded firmly. "All right, Ron, deal. I'll be your assistant, and I promise I'll protect you, as a warrior should." Ron burst into laughter, clapping Marcus on the shoulder with unrestrained enthusiasm. "Bah, that's not what friends do, Marcus. Friends don't pledge fealty or loyalty, they annoy each other endlessly." "You're not my knight, you're my buddy." Marcus laughed too, his heart lighter than it had been in years. From that moment on, their friendship deepened, setting the stage for countless adventures. Ron kept his promise, persuading his father to allow Marcus into the academy's training sessions. The transition wasn't easy. At first, Marcus felt utterly overwhelmed by the estate's grandeur, the sharp discipline of the instructors, and the sheer skill of the other students. He was shy, hesitant to draw attention, but his unyielding determination soon triumphed. Every stumble was met with renewed persistence, every misstep became another attempt to perfect his form. While Marcus toiled for hours, Ron trained alongside him, though not by choice. His father insisted, drilling him in techniques Ron picked up effortlessly. It was almost maddening how easily Ron could absorb and execute lessons after seeing them just once. Marcus envied his natural skill but never resented him for it. Instead, Marcus poured himself into the work. Each move took him hours, sometimes days, of repetition, but his dream propelled him forward. A warrior wasn't forged from ease. Marcus knew hard work was his only path. Between training sessions, Ron attended private lessons with tutors in subjects as varied as literature, history, and science. To Marcus's surprise, Ron arranged for him to join these lessons as well. Marcus felt out of place at first. The thought of sitting in a study instead of standing at a forge felt alien, but he quickly began to appreciate the knowledge. When Ron tied the lessons back to their ghost hunting adventures, Marcus found it easier to connect. For the occult, Marcus, Ron would explain, flipping through a dusty tome. We need to understand everything: history, science, even swordsmanship. The world is full of mysteries, and we need every tool to uncover them. Marcus nodded, soaking in the knowledge like a sponge. Though their paths were different, their shared determination and drive brought them closer, forging a friendship that grew stronger with every challenge. 4 years had passed since Marcus had first befriended Ron Rugal. The boy who once worked tirelessly as a delivery runner now stood tall at 16, exuding quiet confidence and measured strength. Though he lacked the divine blessings that defined true warriors, his relentless training had shaped him into a formidable fighter. He wasn't flashy or famous, but his presence carried an undeniable gallantry, uncomplicated yet commanding. Despite his progress, Marcus remained grounded, his old life a steady anchor. Every coin he earned from hunting beasts or serving as a bodyguard for the House of Rugal went straight back to his uncle Garen's household. Marcus ensured Lisa could stretch their budget further and that little Ari always had something to smile about. He left just enough for himself, knowing the forge, his family, and his home deserved more than he ever would. Life had gifted Marcus opportunities he'd never dared dream of. Through the generosity of the Rugal family, he had a place to train and study, regular meals, and the chance to learn alongside one of the brightest minds he'd ever met. Though he sometimes felt a twinge of guilt for how fortunate he had become, he channeled it into unwavering dedication, both to his craft and to Ron. The foundation they had built was unshakable, and as time marched forward, Marcus knew that together they would face whatever lay ahead. The Rugal family's sprawling estate was renowned across the region, a symbol of power and excellence few could rival. As one of the top warrior houses, their influence extended far beyond their walls, commanding respect and awe. At its center was Ron's father, the formidable Eric Rugal, a towering figure in both stature and reputation. Ranked among the top 3 warrior divinants in the land, Eric was a name that inspired both admiration and fear. His unmatched skill with the sword and his legendary leadership left an indelible mark, cementing the Rugal family's legacy. For Marcus, the weight of serving such a prestigious house was not lost on him. Though he had entered the Rugal household through Ron's intervention, his position was no mere accident. Over the years, Marcus had proven himself time and again, a reliable protector capable of fending off wild beasts, navigating dangerous terrain, and ensuring Ron's safety during his peculiar, often reckless expeditions. The Rugal estate demanded nothing less than excellence, and Marcus worked tirelessly to meet those expectations. Yet, despite his official title as a soldier of the Rugal household, Marcus's role always felt more personal. He wasn't just another guard among the estate's ranks. He was Ron's confidant, his assistant, and above all, his closest companion. Their friendship had been forged through trials and adventures, through shared laughter and heated debates, and through the unshakable trust that had grown between them. Marcus adjusted the leather straps of his gear, walking alongside Ron through the expansive courtyard of the Rugal estate. A large sack filled with an eclectic mix of tools hung from Marcus's shoulder, an assortment Ron had deemed essential for ghost hunting. From rune stones to vials of salt and strange metallic devices, it looked like Ron was outfitting an entire squad of investigators instead of just the 2 of them. "You know," Marcus said, glancing at Ron, "I don't think you actually need a bodyguard. You seem like the strongest divinant I've ever met." Ron smirked, adjusting his gold filigree glasses as the sun glinted off the frames. "Who's going to carry all my stuff if I don't have a bodyguard?" he quipped dryly, gesturing toward the massive sack Marcus was hauling. Marcus chuckled, shifting the bag's weight. "Fair point, but seriously, Ron, you're ridiculously strong. You took down 6 of those bandits last week before I even managed to draw my blade. Most people dream of having the kind of divinity you've got, and you barely even acknowledge it." Ron shrugged, as casual as ever. "I told you before, it's no big deal. I've got the divinity of the war god, sure, and maybe it's a little stronger than most, but that's just genetics or something. Not my priority." He stopped abruptly, causing a vial filled with purple liquid to slosh ominously in his satchel. The sunlight caught the gold filigree of his glasses as he turned slightly, just enough for Marcus to see his own reflection in the lenses, small and human. Ron's tone shifted, uncharacteristically quiet. "What would you do with it?" he asked. "If you woke up tomorrow with my strength?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the sack Marcus carried. Somewhere beyond the estate walls, the faint cry of a street vendor reached their ears. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose, his gaze steady. "I'd train until my hands bled," he said simply. "Because unlike you, I know what it costs to be weak." For once, Ron had no quip. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tic Marcus had catalogued years ago, and turned toward the armory. "Well, good thing I've got you to remind me, then." For someone like Ron, blessed with divine strength and unmatched talent, his disinterest in pursuing the warrior's path was nearly inconceivable. Yet Marcus harbored no jealousy. Far from it, he felt admiration for his friend, who treated his gifts as casually as one might treat the color of their hair. The scent of oiled leather and sharpened steel clung to Marcus as he paused between drills, his breath fogging in the dawn chill. He couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come in 4 years. Once a boy hauling grain sacks for Albert, he now fought off wild beasts and escorted dignitaries under the prestigious banner of the Rugal family. Despite lacking the divine spark, Marcus's growing skill with the sword had earned him respect among the household guards. Even Eric Rugal, Ron's intimidating father, had taken notice. With piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through Marcus, Eric offered no praise, only sharp corrections that cut as deeply as any blade. During one session, Eric flicked his wrist, sending a practice sword spinning toward Marcus. "Your footwork is still sloppy," he said bluntly. "Like you're apologizing for taking space." Marcus caught the blade midair, swallowing the sting of the remark. The fact that Eric corrected him at all was its own kind of recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of Marcus's progress. For someone like Eric to deem him worthy of guidance was a badge of honor, even if the path to earning it was brutal. Across the training yard, Ron disarmed 3 opponents in as many breaths, his movements a lazy poetry of precision. The weapons master threw up his hands in frustration. "Gods damn it, Ron. At least pretend to try." Ron grinned, his confidence maddeningly effortless. "It's not my fault your drills are predictable." He spun a stolen sword on his finger before tossing it back to the weapons master. "Besides, Marcus is the real prodigy here. Did you see his counterstrike yesterday?" Marcus stifled a scoff, unable to deny the absurd gap between their skill levels. Watching Ron fight was like witnessing a composer conjure symphonies out of thin air. Yet Ron treated his gifts as casually as ill-fitting clothes, constantly shrugging them off to pore over moldy bestiaries or sketch spirit sigils in the dirt. For all his brilliance, Ron's true passion remained rooted in uncovering the mysteries of the unseen world. "All of this," Ron would say, gesturing vaguely to the training yard, "is just a backup plan. My real focus is understanding the mysteries of the world. The sword is a tool, sure, but knowledge? Knowledge is power." That evening, Ron flopped onto Marcus's cot, holding a tome bound in disturbingly worn leather. "Swords win battles," he declared, thumping the book with conviction. This wins wars." Marcus polished his blade methodically, the rhythm steady and grounding. "Tell that to the frostwolf that nearly took your head last month." Ron grinned, his expression softening. "Ah, but you told it for me. That's the point, isn't it? You guard my back. I'll map the shadows." Outside, the wind howled through the Rugal banners, a sound like the earth itself sighing. Marcus wondered, not for the first time, which of them was truly holding the other afloat. That concludes Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is coming up. If you want to keep following Marcus and Ron's journey, make sure to stay tuned for the next update. This is Chapter 3, The Proposal and the Homecoming. The setting sun painted the training grounds in molten gold, bleeding across the weathered stone and the disciplined rows of weapon racks. Marcus wiped down his sword, the rhythmic scrape of cloth on steel a familiar counterpoint to the distant, welcoming clatter of dinner preparations. His muscles ached pleasantly, another day thoroughly survived under the Rugal family's exacting standards. He was a creature of habit, of discipline, of quiet gratitude. Then Ron appeared, as he often did, a sudden, sharp silhouette against the fading light. He leaned against a weapons rack with an uncharacteristic stillness that made Marcus glance up, his movements pausing. The light caught the edges of Ron's spectacles, turning them into twin mirrors that hid his eyes. "You don't have to keep doing this, you know," Ron said, his voice uncommonly quiet, stripping away his usual playful tone. Marcus paused mid-motion, the oiled cloth freezing on the blade. "Doing what?" he asked, a prickle of unease unsettling his practiced calm. "This." Ron's vague gesture encompassed the training yard, the vast armory, the entire sprawling estate. "Playing errand boy, proving yourself over and over." He kicked at the dirt, a restless energy returning to his stance. "You've bled for this family more than half its blood members have." Marcus carefully, deliberately, sheathed his sword, the click of the guards settling into place louder than usual in the weighted silence. "Your family gave me everything. This is how I repay them." Ron interrupted, his voice sharp with a sudden, almost furious conviction. "Bullshit." He pushed off the rack, suddenly animated, his earlier stillness shattering. "You think my father corrects your forms out of charity? That the guards follow your lead because they pity you?" He jabbed a finger, unexpectedly firm, at Marcus's chest. You earned your place. Stop acting like you're still that scared kid hauling grain sacks. The raw intensity in Ron's voice startled Marcus, silencing any retort. This wasn't the usual playful banter. This was something bare, something real. Ron saw him, truly saw him, in a way few others did. New deal, Ron declared, shoving his hands into his pockets and rocking back on his heels. The momentary seriousness gave way to his usual irreverence, though a flicker of the earlier earnestness remained in his gaze. You officially become my partner in crime, ghost hunting, ancient research, general mayhem, and in return. He grinned, a wider, almost conspiratorial smile. I make you the best damn warrior this family's ever seen. Full access to the academy, dedicated training, a path to real command. Marcus's breath caught, a sudden, sharp gasp. The offer hung between them, vast and impossible, yet undeniably real. Everything he'd ever secretly yearned for, every sleepless night spent dreaming of a future beyond mere service, was encapsulated in that single, audacious promise. Why? The word slipped out, hoarse, before Marcus could stop it, a question born of disbelief and a desperate hope. Ron's grin softened into something dangerously close to sincerity, a rare vulnerability in his usually japing features. Because you're the only one who doesn't treat me like either a prize stallion or a crushing disappointment. He shrugged, a casual dismissal of profound truth. Also, you're the only person I know who can actually keep up with my bullshit. Marcus looked down at his hands, the landscape of scars, the thick calluses, the dirt ground so deep into his skin it might never truly wash out. They were the hands of a worker, a fighter, a survivor. When he looked up, his vision was suspiciously blurry, the molten gold of the sunset now seeming to swim before his eyes. Deal, he said hoarsely, the single word a sacred vow. But I'm still your bodyguard. Ron groaned dramatically, throwing his head back. Friends don't pledge fealty, Marcus. This one does. Laughter, deep and unburdened, echoed across the empty training grounds as the last of the sunlight faded into a deep twilight. Somewhere in the distance, a cook rang the dinner bell, its familiar chime weaving into the sound of their shared mirth. The future stretched before them, uncertain, exhilarating, and irrevocably, wonderfully, theirs for the taking. The golden light of late afternoon spilled through the high-arched windows of the Rugal estate, painting the polished stone courtyard in warm hues and stretching shadows like silent sentinels across the flagstones. Marcus adjusted the sword at his hip, the leather strap worn smooth from years of use, a second skin. A vibrant current of excitement hummed beneath his skin, tempered only by the quiet, accustomed weight of responsibility. After years of relentless training and unwavering duty, he had earned this, a full month's reprieve. Every servant and soldier of House Rugal was entitled to such a leave once a year, a chance to step away from steel and strategy and remember the lives they fought to protect. For Marcus, the choice had been effortless. He was going home. Yet, as he stood outside Ron's study, his boots scuffing the polished oak floor, a flicker of hesitation held him captive. The frantic scratching of a quill, punctuated by the occasional muttered curse and the clinking of glass, seeped through the heavy door. Marcus knocked, the sound nearly swallowed by the chaos within. Enter. Ron's voice was a distracted bark, sharp with singular focus. Marcus pushed the door open to find Ron hunched over a desk buried beneath a landslide of parchment, ink-stained maps, and strange metallic instruments that gleamed ominously in the candlelight. The air hung thick with the scent of sulfur, old books, and restless genius. Ron didn't look up, his quill darting across the page like a spider spinning its web. I'm taking my leave, Marcus said, shifting his weight. Wanted to tell you before I left. Ron's quill paused mid-stroke. He peered up, one eyebrow arched in mock offense, a smudge of ink marring his cheek. Permission, you mean? Gods, Marcus, must you be so formal? I see enough of your brooding face as it is. A month without you hovering like a lost puppy sounds precisely like my vacation. His smirk, however, took the sting from the words. Marcus snorted, a small smile playing on his lips. Right, try not to burn the estate down while I'm gone. As he turned to leave, Ron suddenly lurched upright, knocking over a precariously stacked tower of ancient tomes with a resounding thud. Wait! He rummaged frantically through a carved chest, sending gears and glass vials clattering like loose teeth, before thrusting a small, cool object into Marcus's palm. It was a brooch. Delicate silver filigree curled around a single, vibrant sapphire, the craftsmanship so fine it seemed spun from starlight. A girl's trinket, elegant, precious, utterly unlike anything Ron usually concerned himself with. Marcus's throat tightened. Ari will adore this, he managed, the words laced with profound surprise and gratitude. Ron waved a dismissive hand, already turning back to his chaotic work. Then go give it to her. And hurry up before I regret my generosity and start needing you to catalog my experiments. Marcus grinned, a genuine, heartfelt expression. Thank you. The words were soft, weighted with unspoken gratitude that transcended the simple gift. Ron's quill resumed its frantic dance. Yes, yes, now leave. The scent of burning cedar and hot iron, mingled with the earthy sweetness of damp soil, guided Marcus home before his eyes could fully confirm it. The settlement sprawled before him, its crooked stone buildings and winding cobblestone paths unchanged by the passage of time, a comforting, steadfast embrace. The forge's glow pulsed like a robust heartbeat against the deepening dusk, and the distant, joyful shrieks of playing children wove through the air, sounds that had once been the constant backdrop of his own childhood. For a precious moment, he was a boy again, with calluses still forming on his palms and dreams too vast for a blacksmith's apprentice. Then, a clear voice broke the memory. Marcus! Ari tore down the street, her braids whipping behind her like dark ribbons, before launching herself at him with the force of a small, joyous storm. He caught her midair, his arms closing around her as her laughter vibrated against his chest. He spun her once, twice, just like he used to when she was small. You're crushing me, she gasped, though her wide grin betrayed her. Liar, he shot back, but gently set her down, gripping her shoulders to study her face. Had she grown taller, or was it just that he'd been away too long, missing the subtle shifts of her youth? Then he remembered the precious cargo in his pocket. Reaching in, he produced the brooch. The sapphire caught the fading light, scattering flecks of brilliant blue across Ari's upturned palms as she cradled it. Her breath hitched, a soft, reverent sound. It's from Ron, Marcus said, a hint of his own amusement in his voice. Ari's head snapped up, her eyes wide. The Ron Rugal? The one who? Yes, that one, Marcus cut in, rolling his eyes with affectionate exasperation. But if you start gushing, I'll take it back. She clutched the brooch to her chest, fiercely possessive. Try it and I'll stab you with a sewing needle. A familiar bark of laughter, rough as old bark and warm as hearth fire, rang out behind them. Garen stood in the forge's doorway, his leather apron streaked with soot, arms crossed over his barrel chest. Took you long enough to visit, boy. His voice was gruff, but the undeniable pride in his gaze was unmistakable. Marcus straightened instinctively under his uncle's appraisal, the disciplined posture of a Rugal warrior briefly replacing the ease of home. Had to earn the leave. Garen's calloused hand clamped onto his shoulder, squeezing once, a silent affirmation of his strength and growth. You filled out. Good. Then Lisa was there, a swirl of warm fabrics and a comforting embrace that smelled of rosemary and hearth smoke. She pulled back just as quickly, her keen eyes scanning him with a mother's discerning gaze. Still all elbows and collarbones, she declared with a fond tut. Do they not feed you in that fancy house? Marcus ducked his head, grinning. I eat plenty. She jabbed a finger, playfully, at his ribs. Liar. I'm packing you a crate of preserves when you go back. Ari, still mesmerized by the glint of the sapphire, looped her arm through his. Tell me everything about Ron Rugal. What's he really like? Marcus exhaled, a deep, contented sigh. The subtle, unyielding weight of swords and duty seemed to lift for the first time in months. Here, in the radiating warmth of the forge's light, surrounded by the loving familiarity of his family, he remembered why he'd ever picked up a blade in the first place. While Marcus basked in the warmth of family, Ron Rugal was already halfway to Leiden, his carriage rattling over rain-slicked cobblestones as dawn bled crimson across the horizon. The town's spires, sharp as needlepoints, pierced the mist ahead, a beacon for the mad, the brilliant, and those who danced on the razor's edge between genius and folly. Ron's fingers drummed against his knee, restless as a caged starling, barely contained energy thrumming beneath his skin. His bags clinked with the weight of forbidden things, vials of mercury that slithered like liquid silver, a compass that pointed nowhere mortal, and 3 notebooks already bursting with theories that would make orthodox scholars blanch. Leiden's library loomed before him, its marble facade etched with the names of forgotten philosophers, their wisdom long since turned to dust. The scent of aging parchment and ink hit Ron like a lover's sigh as he shouldered open the massive oak doors. Metaphorical ghosts today, he murmured to the hollow-eyed bust of some long-dead archivist, his voice low and conspiratorial, but give me time. I'll find the real ones. For weeks, Ron became a tempest in the stacks, a force of nature unleashed within the hallowed halls. He devoured treatises on the Vesuvian Codex, cross-referencing its apocalyptic prophecies with crumbling merchant logs from the Silk Road, seeking patterns where others saw only chaos. He japped a bewildered, trembling monk for access to the forbidden canticle of hollow men, then nearly got himself ejected for laughing at its mistranslations loud enough to echo through the silence. By the 3rd day, the long-suffering librarians had collectively designated him a rolling disaster zone, a one-man avalanche of displaced books, spilled ink, and shattered tranquility. Master Rugal, wheezed the head archivist, a man whose spine seemed permanently curved from a lifetime among the shelves, as Ron nearly toppled a towering ladder laden with fragile scrolls. Must you literally climb the shelves? Ron blinked down at him, a priceless, leather-bound grimoire clamped firmly in his teeth, his eyes alight with a feverish gleam. Yes, he mumbled around the binding, already reaching for another volume. Between his relentless research binges, Ron haunted Leiden's labyrinthine black market curio stalls. He haggled with vendors whose faces were as shifty as their wares, acquiring objects that defied logic and reason. A mermaid's finger, later proven, to Ron's mild disappointment, to be a meticulously carved narwhal tusk, though still fascinating in its deception. A peculiar brass compass that spun wildly and uncontrollably near graveyards, always pointing to nothing discernible, purchased despite its obvious curse. And a shard of obsidian, dull and dark, that whispered in a language not even Ron, with all his prodigious knowledge, recognized. Fascinating, he crowed to the terrified vendor, pressing a pouch of gold into their trembling hands. It's either a conduit for interdimensional communication or the world's most ominous paperweight. Either way, a bargain. At the Scholar's Reprieve, a dim, smoke-filled coffeehouse that served as Leiden's intellectual battleground, Ron held court like a heretic king. Between copious gulps of sludge-black coffee, he passionately debated with anyone brave or foolish enough to engage him. A stoic alchemist, whose theories Ron dismantled with surgical precision. Your elixir of life is just brandy with gold flakes. I've tried it, and frankly, my liver is still disappointed. A trembling theology student, whose earnest questions met Ron's brutal logic. If angels do have wings, how precisely do they wear robes without tearing them? Think, man, the physics alone are catastrophic. And once, explosively, the exasperated town mayor. Your haunted cistern isn't housing ancient spirits, good sir. It's just bad plumbing, and I assure you, poltergeists do not manifest as persistent leaks. Through it all, that fever-bright glint never left his eyes, a restless, unblinking intensity. Because buried in the chaos, between a misdated folio and a druid's drunken ramblings, Ron knew he was close. To what? Even he wasn't entirely sure. And that, he often mused, was truly the best part. The forge's warmth was a living thing, a companion that wrapped itself around Marcus as he sat on the worn wooden bench, watching the coals pulse like a slow-beating heart. Garen's voice, a low rumble, wove tales beside him of old wars and older fools, the firelight carving valleys of shadow into his weathered face. Ari perched on a stool nearby, her knees drawn up to her chin, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames, deep with unspoken questions. She'd been quiet tonight, unusually so, but Marcus knew the storm of curiosity was inevitably coming. It arrived with the soft hiss of a log splitting in the fire, a sound that seemed to punctuate her thought. Do you like it there? Her voice was small but sharp, cutting through Garen's ongoing story. Marcus reached for the long poker, stirring the embers to buy himself a moment, the sparks spiraling upward into the vast darkness of the forge's roof, vanishing like forgotten wishes. It's not like here, he said at last, choosing his words carefully. Everything's sharper. The training, the expectations, even the silence feels heavier. He glanced at Ari, catching the way her fingers worried the edge of her sleeve, a nervous habit. But it's good. I'm stronger now. And the Rugals. He thought of Ron's manic grin, of Lady Rugal's deceptively soft, steel gaze appraisals. They're fair. In their own way. Ari's nose scrunched, a familiar gesture of skepticism. Even Ron? Marcus snorted, a genuine sound of amusement. Especially Ron. He's like a tornado in human form, destructive, exhausting, and weirdly hard to look away from. She giggled, kicking her feet against the stool. I have to meet him. Gods help us all, Garen muttered, a fond exasperation in his voice, as he tossed another log onto the fire. The flames surged, painting their faces in a transient, flickering gold. Marcus let the quiet settle over them, breathing in the comforting scent of iron and pine pitch, of family and home. Somewhere beyond the forge's radiant glow, the village slept, its thatched roofs hunched against the gathering night, its streets empty but for the whisper of the wind. This moment, this was why he bore the blisters and the bruises. Why he'd learned to swing a sword until his arms screamed with exhaustion. Ari's head drooped onto his shoulder, heavy with sleep. Garen's stories faded into the gentle crackle of the fire. The embers burned low, but the warmth lingered, a deep, abiding comfort. The last morning dawned in hues of amber and regret, painting the eastern sky in soft, bruised colors. Marcus stood before the massive, silent forge that had been his childhood classroom, the anvil's usual song of industry hushed for his departure. His riding beast, a temperamental bay mare named Shadow, lipped at his hair as if sensing his hesitation, her warm breath tickling his ear. The saddlebags held more than provisions. They carried the intangible weight of a family's hopes, anxieties, and fierce love. Lisa's embrace lasted 3 heartbeats too long. Her work-rough hands trembled against his back, and when she finally poured away, Marcus saw the truth she'd never voice, that every farewell might, in this unpredictable world, be their last. The sweet, warm scent of her hearth bread still clung to his clothes, a comforting anchor. Come home whole, she whispered, her voice thick, pressing a linen-wrapped bundle into his hands. The familiar weight told him it held her walnut cakes, the ones she only made for naming days, a rare treat reserved for moments of profound significance. Garen's hand fell on his shoulder like a smith's hammer, a weight meant to temper, not break. Remember, the old blacksmith growled, his voice rough with feigned indifference masking deep affection, even the finest sword needs a whetstone. And the strongest man needs a home. His thumb, calloused and strong, brushed the pommel of Marcus's blade, leaving the ghost of a final polish. Ari didn't speak. The charm she thrust at him was clumsier than anything from Garen's forge, a twisted iron knot that might have been a nascent flower, or perhaps a rough, protective shield. The faint soot stains on her young cheeks suggested she'd been working on it through the night, a secret act of love. The Rugal messenger arrived as the village stirred awake, his tabard bright with the family crest against the dun-colored dawn. The parchment crackled with the brittle authority of official decree, the wax seal gleaming like a drop of dried blood. By order of Eric Rugal, Lord Steward, to Marcus of Black Hollow Forge. Assignment: Merchant Caravan Escort from Black Hollow Crossroads to the Rugal Estate. Duration: 3 days ride. Cargo priority: foodstuffs and essential materials. Note: route includes bandits span. Maintain vigilance. Marcus traced the embossed crest with a calloused finger. Not some glorified errand, but a true protector's duty. The kind of task given to men who had earned trust, who were seen as indispensable. His mare snorted as he tightened the girth, sensing his renewed purpose, the slight tremor in his hands settling. Somewhere down the sunlit, dust-kissed road, a merchant would be counting on his blade. Somewhere beyond that, Ron would doubtless be brewing new troubles, awaiting their next adventure. The iron knot from Ari rested against his chest as he rode out, not quite armor, but armor enough, forged in love and ready for the future. That concludes Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is coming up maybe tomorrow. If you want to keep following Marcus and Ron's journey, make sure to stay tuned for the next update.